Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. We are so thrilled. We have a Naperville native here. It's Anna Quinn. She grew up in Naperville and moved away when she was 11 years old, but this is her debut novel. She is also a bookstore owner of a store out in Washington State. This book is called The Night Child, a beautiful novel that you won't think about childhood the same way after you finish this one. It's so wonderful to have you here in the store, and I think what's really fun about this is that you are a bookstore owner as well.
Yes.
So
yes.
Here you are now, a published author with your first novel out in the world, and you grew up in Naperville.
I did.
Which I just found out. I knew it was somewhere around here, but I had no idea.
I did. I grew up in Green Acres. Yeah,
wow.
And it was, and I'll say it again. It was really synchronistic to see that this was the last stop on my book tour. Was the store, this place I grew up. I was flabbergasted.
Yeah, because I looked at your website and you'd gone to a lot of the stores up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of those stores. I've been to many of them.
Yeah.
So there's some great stores up there.
Powell's and
so I'm going to have to come and see you.
Please do.
I would love to.
We would love that.
I would love to.
Yeah.
So, how is it, this book, your first novel out in the world, as a bookseller, as a teacher of writing, and having that first book on shelves everywhere? How does that feel? Because the book's been out about, 7 or so months?
Yeah, it's January 30th it was released. It's truly dreamlike.
Yeah.
It's just, every time I go into a bookstore and I see it there, I feel so still very shocked and amazed, and I'm not sure how to think about it really.
Right.
It's pretty phenomenal. Yeah, it's
I think it's incredible. And
I don't have words.
Well, and you've gotten so many wonderful reviews, and I love Garth Stein's blurb on the front of the book, which is absolutely, he's one of our favorites, and so that's wonderful that he and so many other authors have also talked about this book.
I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. So, what's it like now to be a bookseller and hand sell your own book in your own bookstore?
There's been some interesting moments for sure. Yeah. Sure. And it's been wonderful to meet people as they come in and they'll ask about the book, and then I do need to say that I did write that book, and the response is always really, they're interested and curious and want to talk about it. And fortunately, I haven't had anybody come in and say, unfortunately, anything negative about it while I'm standing behind the desk, because we do hear, as you know, we hear it all about every book.
We do, because not everybody likes every book.
That's right.
The things that you absolutely adore, there are people who don't like it at all.
That's right. Yeah.
So we do take that in.
Yeah.
But I just hosting and going to other stores now and being the author, that you are the event.
Yeah.
Instead of you hosting authors as events. That's got to be a real switch, though.
It's very different. Yeah. It's been wonderful to go to all the different bookstores and see their personalities, and they're also different.
Yes.
And just to see how they set up events and do things. But it's definitely more relaxing to be hosting it than to be waiting to speak. And every time before I read, I always get very nervous, and anxious about it. And then once I do it, so far people have been really responsive. And
a little nervous is good.
Yeah, maybe. Right.
But it's so great you've been around to so many independents, and truly we are independent. That means we are so very different from one another, but yet.
Yeah, and the different areas that different stores focus on, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And I always love going to other stores because I learn so much from other booksellers as well. Yeah. So, born in Illinois. So, you said you were 11 when you moved out to the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah.
So, I should probably ask you, and considering the topic of the book and what it's based on, and it started as a memoir for you, and coming back to Naperville, I'm sure in some ways bittersweet in many different ways. But how did this book get its beginning, and how did the memoir get started? And I just want to know, how did it morph into a fiction novel?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that tonight at the reading too. When I started to write the memoir, I didn't set out to write something that I was going to publish. I really wrote it as a way to make sense of what I experienced with dissociation and childhood sexual abuse, and I wrote and wrote about it for years and years, and I got to a point where I felt like I felt a little stuck in the same kind of the same narrative. It was starting to feel a little worn out, and I felt like I was missing something. And because of that, something I tell when I work with writing students is that when they feel stuck is to change form. And so I decided to do that myself, on my own, with trying poetry and writing through those themes in essay. And but it was fiction that just really changed the story.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think fiction, it's also talking to, people who write historical fiction. And I think it's very true, basically, when you're telling the story of someone's life or your own, using fiction as a vehicle kind of opens up emotional ways that you wouldn't be able to do it in strict fact or even in memoir. I think you can do it through other voices. You can do it in lots of different ways.
Yeah, it's a tremendous exploration, really. And I think our imaginations hold so much information and give us these truths that we've been holding, and we weren't able to articulate what they were, and to explore them through characters that aren't us. They are us, but they're not us. And you can do it from an objective distance. It really can open up your perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
So this whole process, writing the memoir, and I know all the things you did before that, writing poetry and essays and all sorts of things, and also being a teacher of writing, has this process and getting through to The Night Child and this great piece of fiction that you've written, has it been a real cathartic kind of process for you and coming up with the fiction now too?
Yeah, I feel it changed me for sure, and the memoir aspect of it was very cathartic, and but the fiction, using fiction as form, was even more so. I felt that it really shifted my consciousness. Something big happened to me when I was writing from the form of fiction. And I'm really grateful for that and fascinated by it. And it makes me want to write, keep working with psychological fiction and seeing what else is going on.
Well, we can't wait to see what's next. That's so true. So, you've told this story through Nora Brown, and she's a high school teacher. And I love the way you put in so many great books into this book.
Yes.
Whether it was, you're putting in Edith Hamilton, or you're putting in Sylvia Plath and the Bell Jar, to even Margaret Wise Brown and The Important Book, which has always been one of my favorite picture books.
Mine too.
Yeah. Because it says things so simply. That's the way she could always do that.
Yeah.
But I love that through her. But the story is told from a way that it's sort of like PTSD, what has happened to her, and that these memories are coming back that she has buried from her own childhood, and it's sort of a split consciousness that she's had.
Right.
And I thought it was so incredible the way you looked at this, and I'm sure a lot of this comes from your own memories and your own mind. But how was it to write this and to get it right in a way? I mean, did you do any research into more of the psychological things? Because I'm sure you've had a lot of experiences talking to therapists and that sort of thing. Yeah. But did you do some research?
Yeah, I did a tremendous amount of research. I wanted to get it right. Yeah. Right. And because I had gone through it on my own, I had a big stack, from my own therapist that I could go through. And I wanted to come from a place really from inside Nora's mind as she's processing this. So I was really just listening to her and trying to record what I was hearing from her, whatever it was, and so it was really a matter of just truly really listening to her and seeing what that experience was like as she was going through it. And then it helped, of course, to know, the research was more about the continuum of dissociation and what it actually is, and what are the statistics and how many people experience DID, which used to be called multiple personalities. Just from my own background information, not a lot of that's in there. The therapist explains it to Nora, but most of it is coming from emotional truths from my body into hers and back again,
Yeah.
assimilated through her.
Right. But because you can feel this river of dread that's sort of lying underneath what's happening. But without the spoilers, tell us a little bit about the story and about Nora. And there were so many great characters in this book, and you made them so intelligent, so detailed, that it gave a lot of richness and depth to the story and the people that are around her in her life, from her brother to her husband to her therapist named David to even the principal at her school.
John, yeah.
And then Elizabeth, one of her students in the high school. You had some really wonderful characters in the book.
Yeah.
But tell us a little about the story without any spoilers, because we don't want to ruin
Yeah,
it for
it's a
somebody who hasn't
difficult one
read
to
it.
talk about for
I
very
know,
long
and that's why
without
I'm
that.
careful with my questions as well.
No, it is. It's interesting when the publishers tried to decide about the category it would be and how it would be branded, because I didn't set out to write a mystery and definitely not a thriller. And a lot of people have put it into the category of thriller, especially on Goodreads and Amazon. I'll look and they'll call it a thriller. And but I think it just depends how people define it.
Sure.
And there is a definite mystery to it, as she's really struggling to find out what. That she sees a hallucination in her classroom one day of the girl that's on the cover of the red dress, and so the book is about her process in figuring out who that is and what's it about and why is she haunting her and showing up in this way, you know. And
as these memories come back to her, I mean, is just totally, I mean,
shocked,
and disorienting and everything about it. And
it was completely overwhelming experience.
Debilitating. In a lot of ways. So how did books play a role for you as a child? Because I think I read on something on one of your blogs saying that, you know, it wasn't a point of when you were a child or writing about yourself, but it was a point of story was a way to escape into someone else's story.
Yeah.
So how did books play a role?
Books
for you?
were my life. They really were. And my mother actually was the one who brought books into our lives. She drove us to the library here in Naperville. We walked a lot of the time, but or she drove us every single week, and we would bring piles of books home. And that was the best day of my life each week, to be able to bring the books home and smell them and open them and read them. And then when she taught us how to write, it was even more freedom for me, because she was very clear about writing yourself into the stories you wanted to be in, you know, if you didn't like where you were. And I think it was her way of kind of saving the situation at home a little bit and giving you an out, an escape route.
And it just, it goes to reinforce what we do as booksellers, that books really do save lives. In a lot of ways.
I absolutely believe that books saved my life. And I learned so much from every character. And I could see how other families, you know, functioned and how children solved problems. And on the other hand, most of the books at that time had parents that were really lovely and great and wonderful, you know. So that was a bit of a disconnect for me and made me feel very strange, you know. And but I still, the perspectives that it gave me, it really gave me hope and taught me some strong survival skills, and developed my imagination.
And it just shows you how important that children, no matter your age, just see yourself in a story that you can read about.
Absolutely.
And so it's how important it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, all the characters within the book, and Nora herself, and I know they're composites of people in your life, but is there any character in the book that comes close to someone that you are related to, or anybody that comes close, including Nora?
That's a good question. And Nora is a composite, and of several women in my life, you know, who have been through similar experience, and including myself. And Margaret feels very real to me, and probably the most true character in the story. And the therapist is very real. That his lines are almost verbatim in every single section.
I loved his character and how he worked with her. I thought that relationship very interesting, and how he helped her through all. I thought that
Yeah,
was
and
really
he was
good.
a little indifferent, ahead of his time in a way that he didn't really believe in medication, and not that, that's really important too if that helps. But he wanted her to explore these other avenues first, and he was a little different in that way.
You set the novel in the 90s, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
1996.
1996.
It starts in a 4-month period.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and 1996, part of that reason was it was right at the cusp of the technological boom before we all were carrying phones, and I wanted to write a story where I could invite the reader into a theater and just really focus on the characters and not be focusing on technology. And I also didn't want Nora as a high school teacher to have to be dealing with all those kids with phones in their pockets.
Sure.
And it would have really changed the story
sure.
to have phones. And my next novel, there are phones, but it would change everything. She could have Googled everything that was going on with her. She could have. It would have changed everything. But I wanted to also tell the story of what it was like before we had all these things at our fingertips to help us. What it was like, and even Maeve in the story, Nora's mother. She's from Ireland, so she's coming from a culture where she had even fewer support systems. So she was raising Nora in the 60s when nobody really talked about going to therapy, or a little bit they did, but she would not even have known the word, and so she didn't really have any support of what was happening in her household. And that's a big deal.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It would change. It would change the book totally.
Yeah.
And I did like that aspect of you throwing in the Ireland part of this, and her mother and the grandparents, and just. But I think it was interesting to show how difficult it was for Nora's mother to be have a teenage pregnancy, and all the shame and everything that came with it, living in an Irish society at that time.
Yeah. That was important for me to show, because I remember something coming out of one of my, when I was taking the story through a writing group, and people wanted to know, why was Maeve so angry? Why did she take it out on Nora? Yeah. And it's a really important question, because that happens a lot when a parent projects their anger onto a child rather than the perpetrator.
Right. So the Night is told a lot in their therapist's office, and then part of it in the hospital. And it's so interesting, that setting. And is there anything of your own experience that you brought into that? Because it's a safe place. Because David, her therapist, provides that safe environment, which I thought was so great about the book.
Yeah. It was probably one of her few safe containers in her life, and I think that good therapists set up that kind of an environment for you, and the same with in a hospital. And to this day, I'm a very strange person that I feel very safe and comfortable in hospitals. I don't hate them, and it's interesting, how you're shaped by the parts of your story that you felt helped you become stronger and safer.
Right. And I think the thing about the hospital too was interesting. There, showing some of the characters, even the what was her name, the woman in the hospital. Oh, she was wonderful. I loved her character.
Oh, the nurse.
The nurse.
Yeah.
Yes, she was great. But you've been teaching writing for 30 years. I was reading, and was it different, showing other people how to get their mojo on and figure out what their writing life will be? How did you teach yourself when it came, after you've taught so many others, to get this novel? And did you feel reluctant to put it out in the world to let other people to read?
Oh, I felt very reluctant. There was a point when after I changed form and the story was really opening up for me, and when I started giving it to other readers, where I gave it to a couple of author friends. Lydia Yuknovich was one of them. She wrote Chronology of Water. And she's a hero to me, and because and she read it and she reviewed it and gave me some wonderful notes. And at the end she said, "You must put this out into the world, and I will help you do it." And she was true to her word, but when she said it really gave me courage. And it was really like closing my eyes and pressing send to send out the manuscript to agents. And but I'm grateful. I'm glad that I did it now. There are days when I feel maybe that, I have some doubts about whether I should have done that or not. But then this going out and talking to people, it's made me feel that I'm very glad that I did it, and that it's the one way I know that I could maybe help change the statistics.
And that's who you dedicated the book to, is children everywhere that you can help through writing about your own experiences, but doing it in a vehicle that I think will touch a lot more people. I think it's so much more accessible that way.
To have the conversations around it.
So I see there's an audio of the book. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And the reader, who's the reader on your audio?
Cassandra Clare.
Oh.
Cassandra, gosh, I have the name wrong now. I hope you can cut that.
It's okay.
Gosh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but do you like the audio? That would be...
I did. I liked part of the audio. The little girl's voice was hard for me, because, and you can't really have a child actor come in and do it, with that kind of a story. So I think that was part of it. That I thought, that's... But she did sound a lot like Nora in the rest of the story. Yeah.
But Margaret, talking about Margaret with the blue eyes and the blonde hair, which you have, how much of Margaret was you and those things you felt as a child, being like a 6-year-old or whatever age that you were at the time?
Margaret was very true to me. Yeah. She was probably the easiest to write and the most painful to write, because I had to really live it through her again. And but it brought me a lot of compassion for her, and I during the writing process, I felt when an editor had said there's too much graphic detail in these scenes, and we need you to take it, soften it up a bit, and I tried to do that, and interestingly, I didn't think there was a lot myself. I didn't think I had written a lot of graphic detail. I was really kind of stunned by that. So I went through and I tried to soften it and consider different readers. And after about an hour of doing it, I felt really sick to my stomach. And I just went and laid down and closed my eyes, and that's when I saw Margaret again. And she was curled up and crying and felt like I was ashamed of her. And she asked, "Why did you disappear my words?" And I was horrified, because I did the very thing that I was trying to change somehow. So I went back and I put the words all back in again and promised not to do that. But it's really important to me to give her a voice. That was the point of the story. And so that was not an editor with my publisher. That was just a different editor. My editor with the publisher loved it, didn't want to change a word.
I think that made it so powerful. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but that one scene where Margaret goes outside from the hospital and where they hug, that was just a wonderful scene. I just love that part. So
thank you.
No spoilers. I can't say anything more because I'll ruin it for anybody.
Thank you.
So your bookstore, Imprint.
Yes.
That's in Port Townsend.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Writer's Workshop. And Imprint Books.
So how long have you had the bookshop?
10 years.
Wow. Fabulous.
Well, we had we started with the Writer's Workshop, and that was just purely a store that had we had classes, 2 to 3 writing workshops a day. It was a space for writers, not a store, and then we had just books on the arts and craft of writing. And then when the people in our town who owned the bookstore retired, they asked us if we wanted to take it over, and we of course did, and we merged the two. Wonderful. And it's been perfect. It's a beautiful combination.
There is something about the life in books with you, being a bookseller. I think it's a very noble cause. There are frustrations, obviously, but I think that's absolutely wonderful that you combine the two. So I may be calling you because we've been talking about getting a writers' conference together. So I will.
They go together so perfectly. It's just a beautiful combination.
So what do you hope that readers will take away from The Night Child after they finish the book? What do you hope that they will do with having read this experience and and learning something about you, but also learning about what it is for a child to go through sexual, verbal, and physical abuse, but also taking it on to childhood and what can we do in this world to help people.
Yeah. Well, I've heard from a lot of readers already, which has been a spectacular experience to hear what they got from it, and what they brought was so different in many cases. But most people were really taken with listening to the child within, and that's what I brought from it myself, is how important it is, really important, to think about your child's self, who's always there, you know, and do we truly love that part of ourselves, and have we forgiven, you know, the child self and the teenage self and all the way up to the adult self, and
how essential that is.
Yeah.
For us
It's
as
really
adults.
important. It impacts everything that we do, the way that we treat ourselves and
each other.
and each
for
other.
sure.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now? I think you mentioned a little bit because you have phones in the next one.
And I can't say too much about it.
Don't,
but
yeah.
it takes place in the San Juan Islands, and it involves a group of nuns who are radical activist nuns.
I love it so far.
Breaking all the boundaries. It's been really fun to write.
Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That sounds great.
yeah.
Well, promise you'll come back.
Oh, I would love to.
Yeah. Well, Anne, thank you so much for sitting down
thank
with me and
you.
talking. It was great. And
Thank you.
please promise us you'll come back for your
I
next
would
book.
love to. I would love
and
to.
Keep writing. So.
Thank you.
What a great conversation with Naperville native Anna Quinn. She is now a bookstore owner too. She owns a store out in Washington State. This is her debut novel. It's called The Night Child, a transformative, incredible novel about what happens to a few of us in childhood that carries over to a detriment in our adulthood. Thanks for joining me on Author's Review.